Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The pressure inside the Spencer estate had been erecting for days, thick enough to feel in the air, indeed when no bone spoke about it. Bill Spencer, the important and changeable mogul who had spent decades controlling boardrooms, families and fates, was formerly again at the center of a storm that hovered to tear through the lives of the people closest to him. To the outside world, Bill appeared calm, calculated, and business-concentrated, but those who truly knew him could smell when commodity darker was brewing beneath the face. His unforeseen interest in old fiscal records, his private meetings with shadowy connections, and his sharp, distracted address were end concurrents. Commodity was unfolding, and Katie Logan was beginning to realize that whatever Bill was planning could place her family Brooke directly in detriment's way. Katie had spent important of her life drawing up after Bill's emotional wreckage. She had watched him destroy connections, manipulate situations, and justify his jest with the same confidence he used to dominate the commercial world. Yet this time felt different. This time the stakes were advanced. Brooke wasn't just another woman caught in Bill's route. She was family, history, and emotional vulnerability wrapped into one. The study of Brooke being pulled into one of Bill's dangerous schemes transferred a surge of fear through Katie that she couldn't ignore. She began noticing the way Bill avoided direct questions, the way he shut down exchanges when Brooke's name was mentioned, and the way he sounded to be still gathering influence, as if preparing for a major battle. Brooke, ignorant of the full compass of Bill's intentions, continued her usual meter of life at Forrester Creations, fastening on family, fashion, and the fragile peace she had been trying to maintain with Ridge. After times of emotional chaos, she wanted stability, not another chapter of fermentation. But history had a way of repeating itself when it came to Bill Spencer. Their history was concentrated with passion, treason, temptation, and remorse. No matter how important time passed, Bill no way truly let go of the idea that Brooke belonged in his world, indeed when she fought to stay out of it. Katie, on the other hand, had always been the realist. She had learned to fate Bill's patterns long before others did. When he came quiet, he wasn't retreating. He was calculating. When he smiled without explanation, he was generally hiding commodity. And when he showed unforeseen concern for Brooke's well-being, it was infrequently just about protection. It was about control. Katie couldn't shake the feeling that Bill was orchestrating commodity behind the scenes, commodity that could destabilize Brooke's precisely rebuilt life. As Katie started pressing for answers, Bill's responses grew colder and more distant. He dismissed her worries as paranoia, averring that he'd nothing but good intentions. But the more he tried to redirect, the further Katie tasted that he was hiding a plan that involved Brooke in a way she wouldn't agree to if she knew the verity. The apprehension eroded at Katie day and night, turning her concern into quiet despair. She knew Bill's history too well to trust vague solace. Meanwhile, Brooke began to notice subtle changes in her own terrain. Unexplained phone calls, strange names being mentioned and unforeseen shifts in business proceedings at Forrester Creations made her uneasy. It felt as though unnoticeable forces were pushing her toward commodity she hadn't chosen. She couldn't relatively identify the source, but she could feel the pressure erecting around her like a tensing grip. Bill's provocations were embedded in a complicated admixture of preoccupation, protection, and undetermined emotion. He'd spent times persuading himself that Brooke's happiness signified to him more than anything differently, yet his description of happiness frequently aligned with his own solicitations rather than Brooke's requirements. In his mind, shielding her from perceived pitfalls justified any position of manipulation. However, impacting commercial opinions, or still removing obstacles, if that meant rearranging fiscal deals. Bill believed that he alone knew what was stylish. Katie still saw the peril in that mindset. Bill's need for control had always led to unintended consequences. People got hurt. Trust was broken. And families paid the price. She stressed that Brooke would formerly again be pulled into an emotional hurricane, one she might not be suitable to escape from this time. The memory of once backstabbings, secrets, and heartache impended large in Katie's mind, fueling her determination to uncover the verity before it was too late. As days passed, the atmosphere girding the Spencer family grew heavier. Bill's private meetings came more frequent. His mood swings boosted. His silence spoke louder than any concession ever could. Katie's concern escalated into a full-bloated sense of alarm when she discovered fiscal deals that didn't add up. Plutocrat was being moved still strategically, as if preparing for a legal or particular showdown. The details were vague, but the counter-accusations were clear. Bill was situating himself for commodity big. Brooke remained substantially in the dark, ignorant that her name was connected to opinions being made far beyond her control. She continued to believe that her life was eventually stabilizing, that the chaos of the history was behind her. Yet fate had other plans. The murk girding Bill's intentions were sluggishly creeping near, and Brooke was standing right in their path. Katie scuffled with whether to advise her family outright or continue probing on her own. She didn't want to alarm Brooke unnecessarily, but she also couldn't ignore the growing substantiation that Bill's plans involved manipulating circumstances to keep Brooke within his reach. Every instinct told Katie that time was running out. The deeper she dug, the clearer it came that Bill's conduct weren't just about business or protection. They were particular. His undetermined passions for Brooke were driving him to blur ethical lines formerly again. He wasn't simply watching over her from a distance. He was shaping the world around her, still steering events in directions that served his vision of what her future should look like. This consummation scarified Katie. She knew Brooke had spent times fighting for her independence, her quality, and her right to choose her own happiness. However, that hard-won freedom could be stripped down under the guise of concern and fidelity if Bill succeeded in his plan. As the pressure reached a boiling point, Katie prepared herself for a battle. She demanded answers, not half-trueness. She demanded to know how far Bill was willing to go, and whether Brooke's safety was truly at threat. The stakes were no longer just emotional, they were particular, moral, and potentially dangerous. Bill still remained as enigmatic as ever. He continued moving forward with his strategy, confident that his conduct would ultimately be justified by the outgrowth. In his mind, he was guarding Brooke, indeed if she no way asked for that protection. He believed that love gave him the right to intermediate, to control, and to decide. But love without concurrence is a dangerous thing. And as the walls closed in around Brooke's peaceful world, Katie stood at the edge of a disclosure that could change everything. The question was no longer whether Bill was planning commodity, it was how far he was willing to go, and whether anyone could stop him before Brooke came the coming casualty of his preoccupation. The quiet pressure that had settled over the Spencer family soon began to ripple outward, touching every corner of Brooke's world without her completely realizing it. Subtle changes in routine, unanticipated meetings, and rumored exchanges in hallways created an atmosphere that felt decreasingly unstable. Brooke tasted that commodity was out, but she couldn't pinpoint the source. Life at Forrester Creations was as demanding as ever. Yet beneath the face, important forces were shifting in ways that felt deeply particular. The uneasy feeling followed her home at night, moping in the silence like an unanswered question. Katie, meanwhile, set up herself unfit to rest. Her instincts, stoned by times of emotional battles with Bill, screamed that peril was approaching. Every late-night phone call he took, every train he locked down, every precisely articulated statement he offered felt like another piece of a mystification she didn't want to complete. She knew Bill too well to believe that his unforeseen calm meant stability. His calm generally meant medication, and medication frequently led to chaos. As Katie continued to observe Bill's jest, she noticed how constantly Brooke's name surfaced in exchanges he allowed. No bone, differently could hear. It wasn't tender. It wasn't casual. It carried weight like a chess piece being moved closer to the center of the board. Katie realized that Brooke wasn't just part of Bill's plan. She was the focus of it. Brooke's history with Bill was complicated, emotional, and insolvable to abolish. They had participated moments of connection that felt genuine at the time, indeed if they were erected on unstable ground. But Brooke had fought hard to move forward, to reclaim control over her life after times of emotional turbulence. She believed she had eventually reached a place of clarity and peace. What she didn't realize was that Bill had no way truly accepted that separation. In his mind, Brooke wasn't someone who walked down. She was someone who would ultimately come back, whether by choice or circumstance. The shift in Bill's mindset had been subtle at first. His concern for Brooke's well-being had evolved into commodity, more jealous. He justified his conduct by telling himself he was guarding her from pitfalls she didn't see. The world, as he viewed it, was full of pitfalls, manipulations, and people who couldn't be trusted. He believed that only he'd the power and influence to shield her from detriment. But that belief carried a dangerous undertone, control disguised as care. Katie's anxiety strengthened when she uncovered signs that Bill had been using his fiscal power to impact situations connected to Brooke's life. Small adaptations in commercial hookups, unanticipated changes in legal agreements, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering suggested at a much larger strategy. It wasn't about plutocrat, it was about situating. Bill was creating a terrain where he'd come a necessary presence in Brooke's world. Brooke began entering assignations to events she hadn't planned to attend, meetings she hadn't requested, and encounters that felt oddly orchestrated. At first, she brushed them off as concurrence. After all, in Los Angeles, business and particular lives frequently lapped. But as the pattern continued, a sense of apprehension grew stronger. It felt as though someone was still directing the inflow of her life, nudging her toward specific people, places, and opinions. The emotional risk started to show. Brooke set up herself feeling restless, distracted, and uncertain about choices that formerly felt clear. Her confidence wavered in moments when it used to stand establishment. She couldn't explain why, but commodity in her terrain felt decreasingly unstable, as if the ground beneath her bases was sluggishly shifting. Katie, determined to cover her family, began to push harder for the verity. Her questions came sharper, her compliances more direct. Bill responded with the same controlled countenance he always used when cornered. He spoke precisely, choosing his words with perfection, offering explanations that sounded reasonable on the face but demanded emotional sincerity. Katie could tell he was withholding commodity important. The further Bill defied, the further Katie's fear boosted. She started to imagine worst-case scripts, emotional manipulation, legal snares, indeed particular pitfalls. Bill's history had proven that he was able of crossing lines when driven by preoccupation. The idea that Brooke might come contributory damage in his pursuit of control made Katie feel physically sick. Behind unrestricted doors, Bill's internal struggle grew darker. His desire to cover Brooke had converted into a need to secure her place in his life. He saw her independence as vulnerability, her distance as peril. In his mind, every step he took was justified by the belief that he was acting in her stylish interest. But beneath that defense was an important emotional attachment he refused to defy. He'd induced himself that Brooke's happiness depended on stability, and that stability depended on him. As weeks passed, Bill's plans moved closer to prosecution. His fiscal network expanded, legal safeguards were put into place, and crucial individualities were still told. Everything was passing behind the scenes, far from public view. On the face, life appeared normal. Beneath it, a precisely constructed web was tensing. Brooke, still ignorant of the full extent of Bill's conduct, began to feel the emotional pressure structure. Old recollections resurfaced. Old dubieties returned. The history she had tried to leave before sounded to be creeping near, wrapped in familiarity and undetermined emotion. She didn't understand why she felt unsettled, only that commodity in her life was shifting in a direction she hadn't chosen. Katie eventually reached a breaking point when she discovered substantiation that Bill had been situating himself as a central figure in opinions affecting Brooke's future. It wasn't just emotional influence, it was structural. Legal fabrics, fiscal influence, and commercial alliances were being aligned in ways that gave Bill unknown access to Brooke's world. The consummation was intimidating. Katie knew she had to act before Bill's plan reached its final stage. She began preparing to defy him directly, indeed if it meant risking their fragile armistice. She couldn't stay silent while her family's autonomy was being still undermined. When the battle eventually came, the atmosphere was heavy with pressure. Bill remained calm, nearly confident, as if he'd formerly anticipated every blameworthiness. Katie pressed him for answers, demanding to know why Brooke was suddenly at the center of his professional and particular focus. Bill didn't deny it. Rather, he framed his conduct as necessary. He spoke of protection, security, and long-term stability. He claimed that Brooke was safer under his influence than she'd ever be on her own. His words carried the weight of conviction, but Katie heard the peril beneath them. This was ent protection. It was possession. Katie realized that Bill had crossed an emotional line he might no way step back from. His belief in his own authority over Brooke's future had come absolute. And that belief was more dangerous than any external trouble he claimed to be guarding her from. Brooke's world began to feel lower, more confined. Openings started coming with conditions. Support came with prospects. The freedom she valued was sluggishly being replaced by unnoticeable strings. Though she didn't yet understand who was pulling them, she could feel their presence in every major decision she faced. The emotional strain took its risk. Brooke set up herself questioning her instincts, distrusting her independence, and feeling a growing sense of vulnerability she hadn't endured in times. She felt watched, not physically but emotionally, as if someone was covering the direction of her life from the murk. Katie, now completely apprehensive of the soberness of the situation, prepared to involve others if necessary. She knew Bill's influence was important, but she also knew that secretiveness was his topmost armament. Exposing the verity could be the only way to cover Brooke. Bill still was formerly steps ahead. His network was secure. His narrative was precisely constructed. To the outside world he appeared to be a concerned, probative presence in Brooke's life. No bone questioned his motives except Katie. The emotional stakes reached new heights when Brooke eventually began connecting the blotches. The repeated concurrence, the unanticipated pressure, the way certain openings always sounded to lead back to Bill, it was no longer subtle. A sense of consummation washed over her, bringing with it a admixture of fear and treason. She had fought too hard for her independence to lose it now. Brooke began reclaiming her agency, questioning every new development, every unanticipated offer, every helpful intervention. Her instincts, long suppressed by emotional prostration, were waking up, and they were telling her commodity was wrong. Katie stood forcefully by her side, ready to support her through whatever battle lay ahead. She knew the road forward wouldn't be easy. Bill's influence ran deep, and his emotional attachment was stronger than ever. But one verity had come clear. Love without respect is ent protection, and control disguised as care is still control. As Brooke prepared to face the reality of Bill's intentions, the emotional pressure girding the Spencer family reached a breaking point. The choices made in the coming days would determine whether Brooke's future remained her own, or came another chapter in Bill Spencer's long history of emotional dominance. The pressure that had formerly coddled still beneath the face now began to unmask into Brooke's diurnal life in unmistakable ways. What had started as a vague sense of apprehension turned into a patient mindfulness that her choices were no longer entirely her own. Meetings were being listed on her behalf. Business proffers arrived with precisely articulated prospects. Indeed, particular assignations sounded to carry unnoticeable strings. Brooke could feel the weight of someone differently's docket pressing against her independence, and the consummation unsettled her deeply. Katie, watching her family struggle with growing query, felt a renewed urgency to act. She had spent times trying to keep the peace, trying to believe that Bill's intentions were embedded in concern rather than control. But now the verity was insolvable to ignore. Bill wasn't simply watching over Brooke, he was reshaping her world to fit his own vision. Every move he made was strategic, calculated, and emotionally driven. Katie knew that silence would only allow his influence to grow stronger. Brooke's inner conflict boosted as she reflected on her history with Bill. The recollections were complicated, concentrated with moments of passion, remorse, and vulnerability. But what stood out most was how frequently her autonomy had been compromised in the name of love. She had incorrect intensity for devotion, control for protection. Now, faced with a familiar pattern, Brooke honored the peril she had formerly overlooked. The emotional strain began to affect her confidence. She set up herself second-guessing opinions she'd have made fluently before. Her sense of clarity was being replaced by vacillation, as though someone differently's voice had begun to echo inside her mind. That loss of certainty frightened her further than any battle ever could. Katie refused to let history reprise itself. She began gathering information, establishing patterns, and still erecting a case that exposed the depth of Bill's involvement in Brooke's affairs. She wasn't interested in vengeance or battle for its own sake. Her thing was protection. Brooke merited to live her life without manipulation, without pressure, and without someone additional steering her future. Bill, meanwhile, remained convinced that his conduct were justified. In his mind, Brooke was safest when he was in control of the circumstances girding her. He viewed her independence as vulnerability and her distance as peril. The further Brooke defied his influence, the more determined he came.